Here's how to become better than 99% of advertisers in 2026. There's 3 skills that you need to focus on. Number 1 is concept building. Number 2 is bottleneck analysis. And number 3 is measurement. In this video, we'll be breaking down each of these skills, exactly what you should be focusing on, so that if you're a performance marketer, you can be better than 99% of the market. If you're a brand owner, you can beat 99% of your competitors. Starting off with concept building, what are we actually talking about here? Well, everyone focuses on creative at the moment, okay? It's the big hype. Creative is all that matters. There's obviously all the Andromeda talk and content about it. The reality is that when we say creative is all that matters, it's a very broad term with a lot of different subset of skills that exist within it. In fact, it's almost unrealistic to go and tell someone, hey, creative is all that matters, just get good at creative. What are you talking about? Are you talking about production of creative? Are you talking about sourcing creators? Are you talking about scripting content? Are you talking about coming up with new concepts? Are you talking about post-production? Are you talking about analysis in the ad account? Like, what is being encapsulated here? And the reality is that people aren't specific enough in giving you feedback on exactly what you should focus on and what you should potentially delegate and outsource. As a brand owner, as an internal head of marketing, as a performance marketer, this is the specific skill that you should be putting the most amount of effort into. And it is what is called concept building. Now, a lot of people know what this is, but it is building the idea for what the creative should look like, what persona, angle, and offer you should be introducing into the ad. So then you can go and brief it into a specific graphic designer, video editor, creative team that can actually go and build it for you. This also effectively leads into the analysis process, where you can look at concept by concept performance and then lead that into future concept design. Let's go a little bit deeper here. So specifically how we define a concept internally is the intersection of an angle, an offer, and a persona that we're speaking to. I can give you a very specific example. And we can do this by pulling up one of the most famous direct-to-consumer brands at the moment, and we can look at any of their ads. So if we just hone in on this ad right here, the angle is obvious. It's for people that are on GLP-1s. If you don't know what GLP-1s are, it's the subset of drug that Ozempic sits in. So Ozempic's the brand, GLP-1 is the subclass of peptides. The offer is the gummy. There's no real special offer being demonstrated in this ad, so it's just the one SKU. And then the actual angle is healthy hair, and there's also some additional ones in here, but it's really healthy hair. And so if we were to go and look at their internal Google Sheet or whatever they might be using to be building this out, what they would have written down here is the persona is GLP-1 users, the angle is hair, and healthy hair. And then the offer is really just like neutral. They only have one SKU. They only have one product. There's nothing special that they're doing here. They're just offering that product. And so it is this combination that creates the concept. Now, what you want to become very good at doing is taking market research, and this is a very underrated skill within performance marketing that most people don't focus on. It's more like traditional marketing, which is why people have disconnected themselves from it in performance marketing, which is actual market research on particular personas. So now looking into people that are on GLP-1s, what other issues do they face? All right, there's probably a bunch of different side effects from GLP-1s. Okay, we want to figure out what all of them are. We want to go through Reddit posts. We want to scrape through Facebook forums. We want to figure out what kind of issues are these people having. And then how can we just adjust the angle over here accordingly to build out a bunch of new concepts? So maybe it's not just hair. Maybe it's something to do with skin. Maybe it's not just that. Maybe it's something to do with gut-related issues that are caused by it. And so now as we're going down through this, we're building more and more concepts out. Now where this starts to get even more interesting with a post-Andromeda world is that from here, you build your concept, and then you can go and communicate that concept through a bunch of different formats. So we obviously don't just need a static to communicate this message to this persona with this offer. We can put this into a video. We can do a piece of UGC. We could do a carousel. We could do AI UGC. We could do a professional shoot. We could do so much different stuff here. This is obviously one format of a concept that can be done 1,000 different ways. Now, where this starts to get interesting with Andromeda is that previously you could take this exact format and you could test 100 different concepts in this format. And so we would change the messaging so that we're resonating with a different persona and a different angle. The issue now is Meta will probably flag it as the same ad. Even though we're talking to completely different people with a completely different angle, Meta's going to go in and go, this kind of looks identical to the other one with slightly different text. We're going to group it and show it to the same people. And so because of that, not only do we need to have diversity in the either angle, persona, or offer to have a net new concept, but really these days we kind of also need a new format. We need at least a degree of format variation so that Meta doesn't go and automatically bundle our creatives that's similar, decrease our creative similarity score, and therefore throttle performance. And so when you're thinking through the concept too, you also now want to tag a format on. On the surface, to some people, you might look at this and go, well, this is pretty straightforward. This seems pretty easy. I could go and do this right now in a Google Sheet, put this as a heading for each column and start running through them. Definitely. Anyone can do this at an okay level. Doing this incredibly well and generating concepts that are genuinely going to resonate with the target demographic and provide scale within the account is actually a very difficult skill to do. It requires a really comprehensive understanding of the target demographic, of how you can mix these different components to resonate with a particular portion of the market. And that's why this is a very important skill to begin practicing, to begin honing in, so that you can become a top 1% marketer. Now, the best way to get feedback here is to begin creating a bunch of concepts, begin testing them in your ad account, and then getting that feedback loop back. So you'll start to find and you'll start to get intuition for what works and what doesn't. Number 2 is bottleneck analysis. What does this mean? How does this correlate into ad account performance and becoming a top 1% marketer? Bottleneck analysis is ultimately like the fundamental of business, which is that every time you try to scale a business up, there is one component within the business that throttles performance. And so in the sense of a traditional lead generation business, you would have leads up the top here. You would then have qualified leads, so the qualification rate. You would technically have marketing qualified leads up here. Then you would have sales qualified leads. Then you would have like meetings booked, meetings showed, and then all the way down the bottom you have closed. And when you try to scale something like this, and this is just the acquisition side of a business, something eventually breaks. Okay, so maybe the cost per lead gets too high, or the marketing qualification rate decreases, or close rates start to drop. And then you need to go in, identify that point of the bottleneck within the acquisition funnel, and then solve it accordingly. Now, this same thing exists across every business and every different factor of the business. This applies into HR. This applies into talent acquisition. Okay, it is almost everywhere at all times, and it always exists within marketing as well. So when you're going and trying to scale up a Meta account, the reality is that there's always going to be one bottleneck that is stopping growth. And being able to effectively identify what that bottleneck is as fast as possible, and then being able to solve it, is what creates a really good performance marketer and a growth strategist. So what are we talking about here? Well, there's a bunch of different bottlenecks that can force an account to not scale. There is creative, but then there's a bunch of subsets that sit under creative. Okay, because creative, once again, as a generalized term, isn't very helpful or productive for anyone in providing directional advice to how to fix a problem. And so when we're talking about creative, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a lack of format diversity? Are we talking about a lack of volume? Are we talking about a lack of strategical iteration on what's actually working in the account? Are we talking about a lack of persona differentiation? So we just have the same person in every single ad, and we need to start introducing more people to resonate with different audiences. Okay, there's so many different subcomponents here that we need to be able to identify what the actual limiter is and then solve it. The thing that differentiates people that are incredible marketers, incredible growth strategists, and people that are okay is the speed in which and the accuracy in which they can identify the true bottleneck in the business. Identifying the true bottleneck on first go, particularly on a new account that you might not have worked on before, is very difficult to do. Coming into an account and going, okay, I guarantee that it is just lack of format diversity that is preventing this account from scaling, and then fixing that and the account actually scales. That's an incredible skill to be able to have. Now, the reality is that you obviously want to be aiming to be able to identify the bottleneck instantaneously, but having it even as your second or third that you go after and try to fix is still very, very good. You can still scale accounts very quickly there. And that's the skill that you want to work on. Now, how do you actually work on this skill other than actually working on accounts or working on your own account if you're a brand owner on an ongoing basis and continuing to iterate? Well, that's obviously the best one. But the second one is getting good at data analysis. And I was almost going to call this skill data analysis, but bottleneck analysis is more specific as to the actual skill set that you want to be building. So what we're looking at in data analysis is you want to become incredibly fluent in Shopify analytics. You want to understand how to generate reports specifically. You want to become fluent in all of the different kinds of reports, the filters. Ideally, you can take this a step further and you can become fluent and then pulling these out into Google Sheets and becoming comprehensive at molding the data accordingly in a Google Sheet or in something like Looker Studio. You wouldn't believe how much you can do with raw Shopify data in a Google Sheet or a Looker Studio. Like, we have internal sheets that blow people's minds, but all we're doing is just taking raw Shopify data and molding it accordingly. But it's because we know what data actually exists within the SQL database here. And then we know basics of how to mold data accordingly to get specific insights. So even this skill in itself adds massive value to the ability to do bottleneck analysis and then scale accordingly. Number 2 here under data analysis is having an understanding of the ad platforms, even if it is just at a introductory to rudimentary level. I think this is really important for all founders, all marketing managers, anyone that is directly liaising with an agency. If you don't have an understanding of the ad platforms, what will end up happening is that when you go through this data analysis process, it might be the ad platforms that are letting you down, but you don't have the clarity to be able to identify that because the agency isn't very good. And you can't vet it because you don't know that the agency isn't good. And so having a fundamental understanding of the ad platforms, if you're a brand owner, if you're obviously agency side, I hope you have a good understanding here. More specifically, the more detailed you can get in understanding how to do breakdowns, and once again, how to pull raw data out of reporting, the better you will become at data analysis in the platforms. And then lastly is being able to link it all together, and apologies for my terrible handwriting, to the P&L. And so the last component here is we want to be able to zoom out from the ad platforms, from Shopify, with all of the raw data as well as the breakdown data, and be able to link this into the overarching financial position of the business and be able to identify where there is congruency or lack of congruency. And so where we might see the P&L declining, we actually see the ad platforms looking better. Why is that the case? How can we begin to connect the dots and then identify the bottleneck that's actually constraining performance? Okay, all spend was actually distributing into existing customers because an old agency or an old person within the business set up our existing customer definition wrong. And so we thought we were excluding these people, but we weren't actually. So then we can rectify it and spend can flow into the correct position. The issue with trying to provide a step-by-step framework or a document as to how to get good at data analysis is that there is a million different pathways that can exist to solve a particular problem. And so it is really becoming good at identifying what the branches of the decision tree look like at a high level so that you can start to directionally push yourself in the right direction where you can spend hours on trying to solve a particular problem and you know that you're looking in the right direction. The worst thing, and where people can get really down a rabbit hole that just is counterproductive and it looks like a bunch of work's being done but nothing's actually being achieved, is when people can't accurately identify where to look when something's not working. And so instead, when the issue might actually lie in the ad platform, someone goes and spends all their time looking at Shopify and they can't find anything. They spend 5-6 hours on it. They can't figure out how to scale the business. And then ultimately, if you're in-house, you end up just flatlining for a year. If you're working with an agency, you might end up just leaving the agency because they can't fix the issue. And it's because they were looking in the wrong place the whole time. And so the first thing is being able to identify where should we actually look. And then we can start spending a long time starting to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the numbers. Number 3 is measurement. Measurement is really important, both at a smaller brand level as well as on larger brands. Now, best way to think through this is at different revenue stages. So we can go 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure. On a 6-figure business, you should only have one channel. You should probably only have one product. And because of that, really, data integrity here is becoming familiar with MER and CAC. It's really that simple. The revenue, and this is annualized revenue, so this is so low that you just want to become familiar with these two metrics. You want to become familiar with tracking them on a day-to-day basis, and then indexing your decisions within Meta or Google, depending on your one platform that you're advertising on, and making decisions based on the fluctuations in these numbers. Super simple. Number two, as we go into 7 figures, we want to start to take a consideration of 7-day click ROAS. This can be 7-day click, 1-day view if you have a really long time to purchase and you have an average order value above $500. Most people watching this won't, and so use 7-day click ROAS. As we start to get to mid and high 7 figures, we also want to start looking at acquisition MER as a KPI, because returning customer revenue can start to inflate our perspective on efficiency. And CAC still remains. This still is our core measurement system. As we then move into 8 figures, we start to introduce probably another marketing channel. And as we do that, the incrementality of specific channels starts to become unclear, because there is all these channels spending and there's all these channels attributing. We don't really know what's doing what. And so that's when you can start to get into a position where running an incrementality study becomes helpful. I would still be indexing towards 7-day click ROAS, as long as it is congruent with acquisition MER. And then we also have CAC here. Now, at this stage, your retention should be relatively dialed in. You've probably expanded your product portfolio at least by 1 or 2 products at this stage. And so it can also make sense to start looking at LTGP to CAC and introduce this lifetime component, because you will have returning customer revenue. You should also have cash reserves that allow you to potentially be more aggressive on acquisition. And as a function, you can look at this metric to be able to indicate whether you should be increasing ad spend. And then lastly, 9 figures. This is where things start to become very obfuscated, particularly if there's a retail component, which most 9-figure brands have a retail or a B2B or a wholesale component of the business. Then it becomes very difficult, because we also want to measure the impact that advertising dollars has on those other subset revenue components that exist within the business. Okay, when we spend more on ads, do we get more retail revenue? Because there normally is cannibalization of online revenue into those other channels. So because of that, we want to start to introduce some kind of offline measurement system. Now, that could be in the form of incrementality studies. That could be in the form of simply pulling in an offline conversion tracking pixel from Meta into POS. There's a bunch of different options here, and this starts to become actually very specific, business to business, depending on specifically what channels are being introduced, what kind of volume those channels are doing, and the constraints in what can actually be introduced in those situations. And so this is where complexity really starts to increase and occur, because the options that you have here increase. And having clarity into what actual measurement system should be put in place becomes more skill dependent, similar to the bottleneck analysis piece. Okay, when you start to move into larger and larger businesses, it starts to become a higher level of skill set required to be able to identify what measurement system should be used, because more measurement systems become available. You've got marketing mix models. You've also got media mix models in here. You've got acquisition MER still and MER, but you then also have these metrics can be measured against total or just online. And so having clarity into both starts to make sense. We've also got CAC, but we've got CAC online, and then we've got CAC across the entire business, inclusive of Amazon, retail, etc. And then once again, we still have LTGP to CAC as well as an option, but our LTV or LTGP data starts to become obfuscated off from an offline presence perspective because offline LTV data is considerably worse. So it's obviously harder to track retail purchases of someone in a shopping center buying your shopping center is a bad example, in a grocery store buying your consumable product, right? It's hard to measure whether they're repeat purchasing. And so your LTGP calculations start to become heavily reliant on online data only. You also arguably have in here as well as a good option is brand recall measurement, which is done typically through third-party agencies. Obviously, you have your Meta and Google studies in here as well, arguable whether they're good or not. And so zooming out, these are really the 3 core skills that you want to be thinking about improving for 2026 if this is a year that you want to become a top 1% marketer. Number 1 is building out concepts and understanding how to build a good concept and iterating over time. Number 2 is bottleneck analysis, being able to quickly identify what is actually constraining growth within the business and then being able to solve it. And number 3 is measurement. Measurement changes as you go up in revenue levels. It's important to not take a 9-figure measurement system and try to apply it into a 6-figure business. And it's also important to develop your understanding of measurement systems as you start to move upstream and work on bigger and bigger brands, or if you have your own brand, obviously become better at measuring your own success.